This is Signal and Noise, bringing clarity to data, tech, and AI.
All right, welcome to Signal and Noise at LiveRamp's RampUp in San Fran. It's been an incredible event talking about data collaboration, data partnerships in the industry, and obviously a lot of AI. I have here Rio Longacre. Thank you so much, Rio, for having me host at this event. We had almost like a star-studded lineup of really fun and interesting and smart leaders, all the way from the IAB, all the way from the NAI, to health data practitioners talking about what they feel is happening in the industry right now. And so, yeah, I want to hear about your take on RampUp and what you've heard today.
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting. They did an awesome job. We have some great interviews with really smart, interesting, diverse group of thought leaders with different opinions and like some really cool insights. Everything from policy to privacy laws to targeting to identity, you name it. Some really good discussions. Everyone should look forward to that. That'll follow this introduction here. So I guess a couple quick things on RampUp. So I've been going a number of years, great event. And I number one is, I know it's not considered an AdTech tentpole, but it's one of the main AdTech events. It's run by LiveRamp, so I guess that makes it a little different, but it's really well attended. So a lot of the same people I see at a lot of the AdTech events, plus maybe some more. I've met a couple brand clients here, so I think they've been maybe more successful this year in getting some brands. A lot of AdTech people, a lot of agencies. So I think it's a really good mix. It's around, I think they said it's around 3,000 people.
Wow.
So it's
That's a huge attendance.
It's a good size. And key takeaways. So I think, in fact, I have some notes here. So like, I guess, like number one, like it was like data collaboration, not surprisingly, it's a really big topic.
Yeah. And at I noticed a lot more brands here and talking about successful implementations this year than prior. Maybe that was just me seeing sort of yellow car syndrome, seeing it because I talk about it. But I definitely felt like brands lent in more and were talking about, real solutions that are being implemented through collaboration.
I think that's true. I think data cleaners have gone from this thing that everyone thought was a great idea for a product that really first few years struggled to get a lot of adoption. And I even wrote that article, Clean Room Gloom, about a year ago that got a lot of traction about it maybe not meeting expectation in terms of usage and like what are the actual use cases. But I think we're at a point now where it's more of it's become infrastructure. I heard that term a couple times.
Yes.
Clean rooms have become infrastructure. It's an important part of infrastructure. I think for LiveRamp, they made a Habu acquisition a couple of years ago. Some people at the time were criticizing it, saying they may be overpaid. But look, it's part of how they go to market now. It's part of how they're not just saying we have identity, we have onboarding. You're saying it's part of this infrastructure that we're offering, so they can identify better precision advertising, know who their customers. There's a lot that comes out of that, and I agree with you. We're starting to see some actual implementations of data clean rooms. I'm working on 3 right now, for example.
Yeah. So. Wow. And I think the word infrastructure that you said there is definitely a really resonant topic where data and identity moves from being just a signal that is found somewhere and copied and moved on in the industry, and we try and match it here and there and use it where we can, to data and identity becoming, like you say, infrastructure, where it's a really foundational layer of any enterprise's business, and that is what's going to really make collaboration possible and secure and scalable and monetizable, I think.
Identity, you just brought it up. I think that was the other big trend. It's not maybe been the sexiest topic the last few years, but identity's made a comeback. This realization that identity, whether it's Ramp ID or UID2 or any of these identity spines, really are the way that we are going to not only measure but target, right? Especially as media gets more fragmented, we've got more platforms. There's so many places you can buy, especially with the rise of retail media and CTV in recent years. So I think the role of identity, making a comeback, I think it may be even more important, right? But then also a trend I'm seeing is I think the center of gravity is shifting back a little bit on first party data and identity, back from marketing to IT a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, realizing, okay, if we are shifting to this kind of composable zero copy world, like there's going to be a cloud data warehouse. Where's ID going to sit? Probably closer to that.
Yep.
Where's all the decisioning? Our AI models going to be built on top of? Probably there. And who's the steward of that? It's IT.
Yep.
Right. So I think there's like a center of gravity shifting back, and I expect identity to continue to be more prominent.
Yeah. Yeah, and that sort of sits in line with identity as infrastructure, which is always managed by engineering and IT in that way. But yeah, I think that was a topic that Shaylee brought up in the IB Tech Lab. COO talked about their initiatives to propagate those signals inside the CDN, because that is your layer of control as a business.
Yeah, I think we're related to that too. Like if that's your layer of control, if that's where you have identity, if that's, that's probably where you're going to be building out your AI models from. And in order to do that, you need good data.
Yeah.
In order to have good data, you need identity, whether it's for adjustability, for targeting, for measurement, for all these things. I mean, it's really the foundation of it. And so LiveRamp kept hitting that home in a lot of all their sessions, and I thought that was effective.
Yeah. I think it was one of the, throughout the conference itself, I think one of the themes that kept hitting home, obviously AI is just there in every single sentence now, every conversation, but it felt like everyone's really starting to understand how data, identity, and AI collaborate with one another, or come together, and what they are to one another. Because obviously we know the catchphrase, AI is only good as the data you put in, but it's, now we're moving past that. Everyone knows that, and I hope everyone knows that, and we're now moving towards what actually is data to AI in this world. And I think Scott from LiveRamp said it really well, which was, if you leave your car unlocked, your possessions are going to get nicked. And so in the same way, if you consider data to be a valuable asset to your business, lock it up.
And for many brands, they'd argue it's one of the more valuable, if not the most valuable asset, right? I mean, I think one of the airlines, because United was saying a couple of years ago, that their frequent flyer file, like the data they have on the frequent flyers for the 1K program, is potentially more valuable than the airline, right? Which is, airlines aren't a super profitable business, but the data business.
That's an absolutely great example of this, where, like you said, this is actually translating into the money, the valuation of that business division. Like you say, sometimes that the frequent flyer division is propping up the entire valuation of the airline.
Well, not only can they use that to understand who the better customers are and offer them concessions to get them to spend more, to become more loyal, but they can begin to monetize that in different ways as well, whether it's through advertising or data syndication. There are lots of other ways to it, which I think is interesting. And I guess the last point, probably worth bringing up, was while we've seen clean rooms go from more like, an idea to actually gaining some traction as more of infrastructure than a standalone product, I think for AI, we're starting to see, at least I saw, first really good examples of, everyone's been talking about agentic trading. How's AI going to actually impact, whether it's planning, measurement, activation, and management, all the things that in media. It's all seemed kind of speculative up until now. I saw the first really good examples of, how would this actually look in action, whether some of the work IB Tech Lab's working on. Newton Research demoed me some really, really interesting things where they're looking at starting with measurement, then going back, feeding results into better planning, and taking the planning and pushing it actually into activation. So I thought first time I'm starting to see these things become real. I think that's very exciting.
Connect together. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, all of it for me anyway, I don't know, I just sort of look at how the trends of all the topics we've heard about today and yesterday come together. And for me, it helps to paint a picture where advertising and subscriptions and future forms of monetization, pay-per-crawl, they're all just symbiotically part of one monetization strategy for a business, as opposed to what we've had typically in the last 20 years, 30 years or whatever, which is, your ads business is there, your subscription business is there.
Your loyalty program might be there.
Way over there, absolutely not connected in the slightest. And I think that's kind of exciting for me, someone who's been working in, the data space for a long time, is that it becomes the literal connective tissue between, for a business to monetize as opposed to just have an ads business. And I think that's going to meet the consumers where they want to be as well, because hybrid monetization structures are going to be really, really important. And knowing your customer maybe is anonymous or logged in or could be a subscriber one day but isn't yet. I think all those things are going to be really important if publishers with declining traffic want to treat their users like they know them and actually get them to sign up or actually get them to subscribe. All of that needs a data flywheel that sees across it all, which I think all of this stuff points towards.
Yeah, points towards being able to actually use that data. We talked about full funnel and customer journey, and we talked about this stuff for years, right? It's becoming maybe more realistic now to actually do that. I think you're right. Publishers, they play it right, they stand to benefit. But I mean, it's what's the law of the last 25 years? Publishers always get hosed.
Yeah.
So hopefully the changes this time. But
yeah, I hope so. I think so. I'm optimistic on that front for sure for publishers.
All right, good. Any other thoughts? I mean, you've been to RampUp before. This is your first time.
No, this was my first time actually. Yeah, I'd done a lot of. I'm new to New York. I've been here for a year and a half. But yeah, I'd certainly say it was just full of ideas and really smart people. So I'm super glad I came.
Good. Yeah. Well, thanks again for hosting this, and for everyone, we'll have a bunch of other great content coming on Signal and Noise, including every week we've got the pod, and we've got some really great feature-length articles that we'll be publishing over the next month or so. So stay tuned, and thanks again.
Stay tuned. Thank you so much, Rio. So we're at RampUp San Francisco 2026, and I'm here with Daniel Block, who's head of corporate business development at Fetch. Now, I'm an Australian who's just moved here, and I'd not heard of Fetch. Do you get that a lot?
In Australia, yes.
In the US as well?
We're starting to get a lot more traction in the United States. Company's been around for a long time and has amazing brand recognition in the consumer space. Millions of people come to our app every single day to live rewarded and earn our currency, which is called Fetch Points. And really excited to talk with you about not only what we're doing in the on-app environment, but how we're leveraging and monetizing that asset off platform as well.
Yeah, I mean, how much in terms of consumer data? Give us some numbers as to the scale of Fetch.
Yeah, so Fetch is in a really unique position from a data perspective. We're seeing 13 million receipts a day, which is amassing to $215 billion worth of GMV or sales data on an annual basis at the SKU level. So we're talking product, receipt, brand, store, et cetera.
Wow.
And what's really unique about all of that GMV is that actually comes out to amassing the scope of data to be the third largest retailer in the United States besides Walmart and Amazon.
Wow, that's an incredible claim. And so you've obviously sitting on this gold mine of data, and in your role, you're commercializing it. You're turning it into, I guess, the next era of your business, with an asset that compounds and sort of helps you to do better customer experiences as well. So tell me a little bit about that, because obviously you're very famous on the consumer side. You're now at RampUp, so you're talking about data collaboration. You were on stage just yesterday. So give us a little recap of why you're at this conference and what your I guess your narrative is here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it, right? So one of the key focuses for us and an initial growth lever of our business is really highly focused on this exhaust data that we have access to. We've sit on this treasure trove that we feel is completely unique and differentiated. It's unmodeled, and the scale, breadth, and depth of the asset is something that we feel like is a huge asset to brand marketers.
Yeah.
And for us, what data monetization means is actually using the data for more effective targeting, but also closed loop measurement and attribution. The interesting thing about Fetch is because our relationship is with the consumer, we've got unfettered access to this receipt data. That is online physical scans of receipts, but that's also, that's offline physical scans of receipts, but also online connections with the likes of Gmail and Amazon, and a bunch of other providers, giving us a complete picture of consumer spending.
Right. Okay. And your session yesterday was with an audio network.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. So in my experience with data collaboration and clean rooms, usually the easiest way to do all that is cookies and, just standard collaborations on segments and things like that. I wasn't actually at the session yesterday, but if I'm thinking about who you were talking with, you've got a unique data set that is online and offline and image captured and lots of different formats of information. And you're presumably discussing matching into an audio environment.
Yep.
This feels complicated. Talk to me a little bit about the layers above and beyond that you guys have gone through to stand up such a, I guess, complex and sophisticated collaboration.
Yeah. So for us, we've got 100% coverage over a number of different identifiers, which really helps us from an identity perspective understand who that consumer is. So consumers, when they sign up for Fetch, it's things like first name, last name, email address, and phone number.
Yeah.
We're here at RampUp. One of the unique parts about our relationship with LiveRamp is all of that data and information comes into a waterfall and gets resolved to a unique ID, like a Ramp ID. We also have other identity providers such as UID2. So for us, being able to match any of our unique identifiers to exposure logs to be able to prove outcomes for brands is something really unique and differentiated. On the audio side, those exposures are, to your point, a little bit complex and complicated.
Yeah.
SiriusXM also happens to own Pandora. Pandora does have a logged in user. And so those digital formats allow for more effective targeting and measurement. I think early stages of how Sirius is thinking about data monetization and their commerce media play. I'm not going to allude to what they're doing on their side.
Right.
But for us, we want to be able to meet buyers where they are.
Yeah.
So we want to take any impression and match it to our verified transaction data to prove sales, return on ad spend, conversion rate, and ultimately incrementality.
Yeah.
So leveraging the power of the Fetch data, we feel very bullish on our opportunity to do that at the SKU level. And that's the product that we want to give to brand marketers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I said, you've obviously been sat on this stage for a while, and I'm sure you've been shouting from the rooftops to use it better, use it more collaboratively in market. I guess one of the we've covered a lot of the good and all of the good things about data collaboration, what you want to achieve. Let's talk about the bad and the ugly, not from a company perspective, but more just, you're obviously a very tenured executive in the industry. Just observationally, what do you think about data collaboration? Are there topics or are there outcomes that you just sit there and you're like, oh, this should be better by now, or this almost a frustration that you've held in and around the topic of data collaboration that you would like to see resolved with a magic wand?
So I think that there are two things. One, I'll talk a little bit about LiveRamp because we're here and we're also partnering with them on this. So cross-platform measurement, so the ability to actually measure at scale, I think is very unique. And I think the next wave of digital outcomes being proven in offline transaction data, being able to help kind of facilitate that. So for a long time, measurement has been done in silo. This platform delivered this return on ad spend. This one did this, but there's no real, all of my publishers in one kind of clean room box to help me understand, here was my social investment. Here was the conversion rate, return on ad spend and lift. Here was my connected television.
Yeah.
What that allows brands to do is understand things like channel mix, reinvestment into different mediums, pull back, push forward, heavy up. And I think for starters, like the ability to do cross-platform measurement is absolutely something that is on the precipice of really interesting net new opportunities.
Yeah.
The inverse of that, and one thing that, going back to your question, that in my opinion needs to really stop, is the pendulum has swung so far to folks that have data assets modeling their data without deterministic quality. What I mean by that is, if you look at things like the LiveRamp data marketplace, you might see a transaction data provider have yarn buyers, for instance. They might have 200 million yarn buyers. Is that real? Likely not. So at Fetch, what we're focused on is completely deterministic data, being able to take deterministic seeds that are highly relevant and provide an actual outcome, all backed to identity. So, as we think about the future of data and data collaborations, building audiences with deterministic data is really where I want to see the pendulum swing back. as opposed to folks just looking for the biggest audience sizes to scale campaigns.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think emerging technologies, I totally agree that emerging technology is going to make it easier for people that have data to use it, to monetize it, which I think hopefully will start to reduce the need for these slightly questionable, segments of 2 million pet intenders, which are like, really? Like,
Yeah.
Are you sure? So yeah, I think that's definitely going to change the paradigm to, in favor of data owners like yourself. Now, final topic, which it wouldn't be podcast bingo if we didn't put AI in there a little bit.
Yeah.
AI obviously sort of intersects with data collaboration in some ways, but every business is using it in a very different way. So how do you think about it personally, amplifying, maybe it's your part in your company, or maybe it's the products that you're monetizing?
Yeah. So we made a strategic investment to hire a chief AI officer here at Fetch, and his team is running what we call Fetch Labs. They're responsible for all agentic projects that happen at the company. We've tripled down in that area and are highly focused on that in really two distinct fashions. One is delivering better in-app experiences. So how do we continue to model and refine what we're doing for ranking and relevance, leveraging all the purchase data to make sure that we're delivering the right message at the right time to the right consumer.
Yeah.
So every single app experience looks completely different. That's on the in-app side. Now, off-platform, what we believe, going back to this conversation around data seeds and intelligence there, is agentic buying and agentic extrapolation of data. So showing future propensity to purchase a product based on a really strong signal. It's kind of the future of buying.
Yeah.
And we're talking to partners right now to better understand, okay, if someone bought at McDonald's, how do you start to leverage that seed and signal to deliver propensity and future buying behavior and pattern recognition? And that's what we're really excited about in AI.
And does that, that's a really good point, actually. And does that, to further, I guess, elaborate on that, does it help you to also illuminate the blind spots where, say, for example, data collaborations might not reach because they're email matched or they're one-to-one, or they may just not have as much reach in certain channels? Is that something that you look at as well, like to use AI in that way?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think anywhere that Fetch can bring in additional signal to help better understand what this consumer is doing is certainly helpful.
Nice.
We feel the greatest indicator of a future purchase is a past purchase. Having that deterministic signal tied to an identifier and then leveraging all the other inputs that might be available to better target and ultimately measure the impact of advertising is really what it's all about. And for us, leveraging this conversion data at scale is completely underutilized. And we want to make sure that instead of a brand marketer going back to their CFO and saying, hey, I delivered 3% incremental reach on my linear television investment, they can go back to the CFO and say, my investment here in media this past quarter drove X in sales. And that is how you can continue to defend your investment. And in a world of outcomes, there's no better signal than Fetch to help brands do that.
Oh, absolutely. You're going to make a lot of CFOs very happy for sure.
Yeah.
So to just finish off, is there anything that either you didn't want to say on stage, a hot take from yourself that you're like, oh, I'll save that for another time, that you want to leave us with, or anything else that you've observed throughout RampUp that really resonated with you, and maybe a soundbite that you found meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that we didn't say yesterday on stage. I think the areas of interest for Fetch that we continue to be bullish on, and definitely continued investment in connected television.
Yeah.
And ultimately, folks are getting more sophisticated with how they're buying that medium.
Yeah.
And we think the next iteration of that is, how do you continue to get more sophisticated with not only the buying mechanisms, but the measurement, and then ultimately, feeding into things like real-time optimization to better serve ads to the right consumer at the right time. And I think that's a medium that's ripe for disruption. Obviously, the fastest growing medium that's happening right now in media investment. So continued investment and watching things change in that space has been really interesting.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, Daniel. It's been a real pleasure to chat to you and hear your hot takes on what's going on in Data Collab. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, we are at LiveRamp, San Francisco RampUp 2026. And I've got with me John Mangano. Thank you for joining us. And you're from Semantic IQ, right? Is that?
Yeah, it's semantic.
Semantic,
Yes.
perfect. Okay. And you've got a really fascinating, specific niche that I really want to get into today. And you're also a podcast host yourself. So I think it's going to be a really cool back and forth on this topic. And the topic is health data, and specifically how that relates to data collaboration, privacy, and also. So give us a little background to yourself first and how you got into this niche.
Well, I, for the most part, fell into it where I think most people do in the health space. Just was a marketer and had an opportunity to help a company work within the pharma space. And the need that the market had at the time was to be able to quantify and really justify their digital campaigns in the pharma space. Worked for a company called ComScore, which did measurement. And we had to build the way that media, which was a very unique data set, was analyzed within the health data, which has so many HIPAA regulatory privacy restrictions, but to turn that information into very compliant, but insightful findings for those campaigns. And we were able to prove when you market to patients, they don't just talk to the doctors, but they get healthier.
Right. And forgive my, I guess, not ignorance, but just not that depth of understanding. Would you say that health advertising and HIPAA and all the, I guess, compliance that you have to go through in order to use data in that space, would you say it's sort of where the rest of the industry needs to catch up to, or is it just a totally separate piece?
Well, with health data, there's a lot of very sensitive information about our health, and it certainly should be protected. And it is, and that doesn't mean it can't be used. So, understanding that a certain population set, just a large group of people, has a condition and what they have in common helps us as care providers figure out how to make them feel better. So it's important to be able to use that data. But in our space, we don't really care what an individual has. I mean, we do on an individual basis, right? Everyone as well. But for our research, we don't need it. In fact, individual data doesn't help us. It's knowing the big trends of them. There's thousands of people who have a certain reaction to a brand. And when they get on a treatment, that is a success because we know they're getting healthier.
Got it. And that, I guess, is an interesting segue into what AI is doing to this space in particular. Now, I, as a consumer, have noticed a lot of, just from the early days of using ChatGPT, it was, regardless of whether the information coming back to me was good or not, it was more just that I had somewhere to talk about my health issues or maybe upload a picture or whatever. So I guess what I'm interested in viewing your perspective on is how does AI change how health data gets used, and what do you see in that space from your?
Sure. So on the patient side, what health data can do is connect needs, right? So it used to be maybe 5-10 years ago, you'd research a condition and you'd learn about the condition in general terms. In the new world, you can not just research a condition using ChatGPT, but upload maybe your test results, upload what your history has been, and ChatGPT can start to look at it and identify trends. So it could be that, yes, you have this condition, but it also is tied to your BMI, and your BMI has gone up lately, which is something I personally am dealing with. And it helps you understand like what the causes are versus one-dimensional understanding, because all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I just need to lose weight. I don't actually have a condition like this, or if I lose weight, the condition will reverse.
Right.
In health data, it's the same thing. Instead of looking at the patient, companies can do their analyses using that type of information, that type of multivariate analysis that can put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
Where I've had teams do it, now you can have a machine do it in minutes, and have that kind of result.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually. And I also imagine that there's also a use case for looking at health data over time for an individual, maybe. Where, like, for example, the reason I say that is a lot of health conditions or a lot of health predictions aren't adequately dealt with, say, by my general practitioner, just because they're looking at what I'm saying to them in that appointment and not what I've been feeling over the past year.
Exactly. So if you look at a healthcare provider, they only see what maybe you tell them. And how you might tell them how you feel may be different based off of the cultural response. Some cultures, you don't talk about your health and your pain. Other cultures, you talk about it a whole lot, and it's very different, right? So you have that piece where the AI can actually help interpret what someone is saying. And I had this situation happen. A dear friend of mine, she used to work for me, and she resigned. And she's from Russia. And, resigning to someone you like is hard. And then there's also the cultural differences. And I wrote down notes on what she told me, and I genuinely couldn't understand why she was resigning. I even shared that with our head of HR. The note-taking tool that I used in my iPad, a month later came out with an AI interpretation module. So let me see what my friend really meant. And by then she had already had second and third conversation with me, and I knew. It interpreted it to exactly what she finally told me, a month later. So that is where if you think about it, that's kind of nice for the situation I had. But if you think of a doctor talking to a patient, having a tool that helps them understand the degree of expression of what that is really helpful.
And the context within which that request or data point sits.
And then add that in with all the other specialists and the full history of what my health record tells me. So now it's looking at what every other doctor who might have seen the same symptom across the country has found, helps that doctor understand more. There's a lot of medicine is tied to genetics. And, you and I have different genetics. My wife has different genetics. When a doctor's looking at it, they can't take all of that into account necessarily. And they may not have the sample of experiences with patients with all the different types of physiology. Now AI can pull the data nationally and start to say, oh, we've got some trends. Someone who is like John is more likely to do better on this brand of drug versus someone who is like my wife. And that makes such a difference as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where I could definitely see it going. And so to bring that back to RampUp and data collaboration, what are some of the, what's the one or two things that someone like you has to deal with and think about more so than someone that's not in health data when it comes to data collaboration?
So for me, data collaboration is two pieces, right? It's the health data as well as the media or other type of exposure data. And the challenge is they're often both very restricted in how you offer HIPAA with health and just for data ownership within the media side. LiveRamp has done a really good job at creating the environment, not just for a clean room for that data collaboration, but now having the ability to have third parties create analysis associated going through those different data sets. So that's something that we're working with at Semantic, is looking at health data that a client might have put into the clean room, as well as media exposure from 20 different publishers to then come to the understanding as to how to optimize the campaign or what is working better.
Okay. That's I guess that's a really fascinating area to, tie all to partners data or outcomes or public data. You're out the actual impact.
And ultimately, health marketing is successful if it means people are getting healthier. And using this health data, we can see the degree to which people who see ads talk to doctors and then ultimately start a new treatment, and even see how long they stay on that treatment to see if they're being treated properly and their outcome is improved, all within a HIPAA compliant anonymous way. So we know in general that people's health has improved as a result. But we don't know who it is, which is so important to us.
Well, look, the pursuit of better personal health is a really great one. So I really appreciate your time and your candor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. So we're at RampUp 2026 in San Francisco, and I've got Lee Freund here from the NAI, which I want you to break down for me and help me understand what the NAI is. But firstly,
you've got a really interesting background. When I look at, policy and privacy, there aren't too many people that sit across both. Lots of people have either privacy or policy, and obviously they're bleeding together, especially with what's happening to Venezuela. So just give us a little intro to yourself and how you got.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Lee Freund. I'm the president and CEO of the NAI. The NAI is a self-regulatory organization and trade association that represents AdTech companies in the, as you pointed out, in the areas of consumer privacy and data protection. So I came to the NAI 11 years ago from AOL, where I had spent a dozen years both leading their advertising teams from a legal perspective, and then my last couple of years at AOL were leading their global public policy efforts. So that gave me a real insight into not only the business of AdTech and the technologies and the contracting and the partnerships, but then as head of global public policy, I was able to understand the policy implications of how policy and lawmaking impacts those businesses. So at the NAI, moving over to the NAI,
And given AOL is one of the OGs, let's say, of AdTech. It's been around since certainly since I started my career as one of the incumbents. And your role there was looking after global policy.
Yeah, so my first few years were spent representing the legal teams or the advertising teams from a legal perspective. So I did all of the partnership deals, the contracts, and in that vein, got exposed to the data and privacy implications of doing deals.
Right. So it was almost a byproduct of the job you had to get done, that you needed to sort this bit out.
Yes. Yeah. And then they asked me to step into the role of head of public policy there. Yeah, policy intersected in really interesting ways. If you're talking about the privacy, one of the first things that I was involved with in that role was the Reform Government Surveillance Coalition, which AOL is part of, which talked about government surveillance of people's data and whether or not, companies like AOL could have any say how governments get response. So that was a really interesting, eye-opening experience for me. And now, you fast forward to today, policy implications of what we do in the AdTech space are really impactful.
Absolutely. And what you're saying there, it feels like you've been grappling with not the same old topics. So it's not like that to say, but you've been definitely dealing with topics that are front and center now a long time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that sometimes we have the same conversations that we've been having for the last 20 years, right? And it all boils down to what data are you using? Do you understand where it's coming from? Do you understand the use cases around it? And are you disclosing them? Right. So that's a lot of very basic premises or principles that a lot of our work is based on.
Right. And with that in mind, what would you say is something that has been in existence in your mind, a problem, challenge, in this space that you feel just has moved too slowly, just needs more attention?
Yeah, so I think, if I could boil the ocean down to one small, cup, I would say unexpected uses of data in our space is the biggest threat and the biggest motivator for a lot of policy and lawmaking is coming down on our ears. So, so you collect consumers' data, you want to show them a relevant pattern. But there's all these other unexpected uses that I think everyday consumers understand. Also, that data gets used for only one, potentially selling content and our advertising data to the government.
Right.
And so that is converging in a really interesting way in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I guess it does say unexpected. If you could unpack that.
Yeah, sure.
Does unexpected also cover AdTech and crawlers and AI maybe? Like, is that in your wheelhouse of unexpected or not so?
Well, it depends. I will say, and in the perfect lawyer response is, it depends.
Yeah.
Right? It depends. One part of what, how you educate consumers about data uses is through your disclosures, right? So your privacy, well, it's very basic, and other ways that you interact with your users to help them understand that you're using their data, purchase data to serve additional relevant ads, or that we're using the interests to serve them ads. If they're like auto intender, you kind of know that and sort of have auto ads, which are interesting to them as they're going through that purchase funnel. And if you're not disclosing that, that's when you hear people speak in the policy world about the creepy factor, right? My phone is listening to me, or I just had this conversation with a friend at their house about a new product, and I came home and now I'm getting social media updates for that.
For sure.
Right. So that seems creepy to folks and therefore perhaps unexpected. But I think there's a lot that the ad tech industry can do to debunk that by doing a better job of explaining what data there is, how people expel data, what data are we using and how we're using it, so that they'll feel more comfortable and trust their internet usage. All of that.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Where throughout my career, I've always felt that the say-do gap of this stuff from a consumer's perspective is quite wide, in the sense that people say they want privacy and then they act as if they don't want privacy on the internet, or they use products in a way that isn't helpful.
Yeah, I think there's really a give and take,
Yeah.
right? So I think, first of all, a lot of the questions are, do consumers want privacy? If you were asked, do I want privacy? You're never going to say no to that. But if you're asked, are you willing to give up a little bit of your data for the benefit of a free and independent internet?
Yeah.
The answer would be a lot different. Yes. So part of it depends on the way you ask the question. But I also think there's tremendous benefits from data. We have insights that can help humanity, that can help consumers, that can help brands, that can help publishers. And so being able to do that in a responsible way while not going to the end extreme of using data for things that you don't want you to use data for is where the NAI and some of the other policy folks that work in this space are trying to distill from for companies.
Okay, and that brings me to, I guess, a really interesting question for the president of the NAI, which is AI, and how AI intersects with data, separates it, kind of black boxes it a little bit, and that sort of, to come back to about the creepy factor as well. I see implementations of AI-led data extrapolation usage that make things more creepy.
Yes.
But also don't come under the same privacy scrutinizations as the data itself. And so I'm interested to hear from you, like, what keeps you up at night with regard to AI and what's happening?
Well, yeah, there's a lot going on, certainly. And I think if you step back and look at it from a macro level, from a policy perspective, public policy perspective, there's a lot going on with AI. There's global competition in the AI space. And so there is a hesitancy to regulate. You've seen that from the current US government dictating to states that they don't pass any regulation on AI. There's arms races with other governments about how they're using and deploying the AI resources we have. And one of the things that the U.S. has always benefited from, I think, is a sense of a light touch regulation around new technologies. It's one of the reasons that we have all of these companies being founded and developed in the United States.
Yeah.
So I think then there's a hope that we can preserve that. So you start with that premise, and then you say, but what about these unexpected or unknown uses of data? And I'll say that the same laws that apply to use of data for advertising or other uses of data and privacy laws also apply to AI. So that's the baseline, right? The FTC Act which is the federal law that prevents unfair or deceptive trade practices or acts against consumers, applies to AI in the same way that it applies to all of the other technologies we have. So that law is very technology neutral. And you have all the other privacy laws that have been passed in the States and internationally. And sure, all of the other privacy laws that other countries have passed. So I think though the understanding what data is being used and what it's used for, and are you disclosing it properly or sharing it properly, responsible use of data, those premises and principles will still apply for AI. The tricky part is that it's much more, as you mentioned, it's much more, right? And so it's harder to understand and see that movement of data. Besides all the other implications of publishers' data scraped in unfair ways and all kinds of other competition issues with that. But I think, we are going to reach, especially in advertising, when we were talking about for programmatic or their advertising results. You're really going to get to a point where you're going to have to make sure that the engines that we are using understand the data flows and also understand where the data is coming from, whether that partner is collecting that data in a safe way, right, or a responsible way. And so that is where I think the rubber meets the road, is they're going to have to be privacy scoring or data scoring, or are we going to, be sending information along with this data was collected appropriately. So agent, it's okay to use this, but it's not okay to use this. So I think we're just starting that journey in AI governance, but we should start with the premise of the basics, at least, which is all of these rules still apply to data use generally, regardless of if you're using it AI.
Sure. That's a really interesting point in terms of teaching your agents about the data. The concept of that is a really interesting one for the next year, next couple of years. To set that standard, not at the is the human using it properly, but is the agent using it properly?
Right.
But that's fascinating. Sounds like you got a lot on your plate.
There's a lot on our plate. Yeah. I think, looking ahead to the future, one of the things at least in public policy space that we now looking at is the divergence in the way different, at least U.S. governments or administrations look at these things, right? So the prior administration had a much more regulatory heavy focus with the former FTC chair. And now now under a new administration, it's backed off. So we'll see where that pendulum focuses in the next few years. But there are definitely different thoughts on different approaches for that. So I think that's a variable factor as well.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really illuminating and fascinating thing we're discussing. Thank you so much, Lee.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice to talk to you.
Fantastic. Thanks.
All right, so we're here at RampUp 2026 in San Fran, and I'm with Scott Messer, AdTech therapist. And we are talking a little bit about publishers and data collaboration and what that sort of entails over the next couple of years. Scott, you've got some really interesting takes on this topic and what content businesses are finding perilous, what they need to do more of. And so talk me through your thesis, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, let's go on a little bit of a journey here. So we're going to go through some examples and you'll see where we wind up at the end. The first thing was I came out a couple weeks ago after leaving IAB ALM and hearing some confidential stories from sources. And it drew me to the conclusion that using LLMs is funding organized crime and state-funded terrorism.
Okay, this is a big call. Let's dive into this a little bit.
And I will say, there's a bit of a leap, and it's not all of it. And I'm not saying don't use AI. I'll tell you why I'm bringing this up.
No, for sure.
But the way that it happens is that in order to scrape content and sell it in a marketplace, you need large scraping networks, which are essentially headless browsers using residential IPs and proxy locations to visit websites, scrape the content, and then send it back. In order to build an army of those, it would be very expensive and very difficult. But these armies actually exist already.
Sounds familiar.
Ad fraud. So a lot of the companies who commit ad fraud have those exact same pieces and are now using them instead of spreading malware to go and scrape publisher websites and to build large corpuses of content that can be sold to LLMs for training purposes. There's two inherent problems. One, that content was not paid to the publisher in any way. And two, some of those companies that have those scrapers, especially the ones that come from law fraud organizations, their money goes back to organized crime and state-funded terrorism. So that's bad.
Okay.
And people just need to understand that stealing content from publishers is not a victimless crime. It's like the handbag market, right?
Mm.
There is a illicit market for handbags, and it's not a victimless crime. Sure, Fendi doesn't get as many sales, but also what happens from the money that those organizations make, and where does that go? And I can promise you that is used for things that are way worse than counterfeiting handbags.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a drastic example, but the fact that I think we all understand that whenever new technologies emerge, good actors emerge, but bad actors tend to emerge pretty quickly as well. And so, what's your key call out here for content businesses and the way that they've got to sort of change their mindset a little bit over the next year?
Yeah. I sort of break it into what's in your tool set for a publisher, a content creator, because the ultimate goal is to compel the LLMs to license content legally through marketplaces, so a publisher can get money directly and build that into their business plan.
Right.
Currently today, some of the small LLMs are licensing content, but the big ones, OpenAI and Google, and Perplexity, we'll throw them in there, are not.
Okay.
And why would they want to do it when they are taking something for free and selling it for a very large markup? It's a great question, right? Like, we have to compel them. So that's the language I use, compelling the LLMs to the place. And it's not one single thing that will do it, but there's a series of sticks that exist in our toolkit. And I'm going to talk about carrots just after this, right? Because it can't be only sticks.
The carrot and the stick.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So the carrots that are in your toolbox are private litigation,
right,
government regulation,
yeah,
competitive action, model dehydration, and public sentiment. So that last one where we talked about funding organized crime, that sort of goes into the public sentiment one. Another one for that is if we defund journalism by removing traffic from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and whatever your favorite newspaper is, they can't pay for journalists. They can't give them safety equipment.
Of course.
And that becomes a problem, and it sort of degrades society. And so society should care about that. That's one thing that's weighing in the minds of Google and OpenAI of like, how does the public feel us taking this content?
Of course. And you mentioned one slightly more technical one called model dehydration. Could you elaborate on that? Just layman's term, that one?
Model dehydration is when the content literally is not available to these models, and you can think of it becoming dehydrated.
Right.
If the breaking news is not in a model, it becomes like ChatGPT was 3 years ago, where it only was trained up to 2022.
Very frustrating.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you start removing large chunks of information from these models, they become dehydrated. And they become relatively useless, actually. Like, think about how much real-time information you need in one, not just to do coding, but if you want it to be an agentic browser, if you want it to read the news, if you want it to update you and do these things, they need real-time information.
Yeah.
So model dehydration is, publishers can employ that by moving from an allow list moving from a block list of blocking all the scrapers that come to them to an allow list and only allowing certain robots onto their site.
I see.
Now, you're going to block some good ones, and you're going to have a conversation with them.
I was going to say you'll end up blocking by default too, right?
Do not block your ads.txt robot from the IAB, because that will delist you from all the marketplaces as soon as you do that. So allow that one and several others. You still have to grapple with the question of like, should we allow the Google crawler or not? And there's a lot of popular opinion out there that says, actually, we should be blocking the real Google search tool, because they are taking that data and it is being fed into Gemini, and it's sort of coming around the back, and it's still in the Google index, and they are training on it. And like, if you're getting very little Google traffic, why should you be feeding your information to Google?
I feel like a lot of ad tech crawlers are going to see their inbound traffic dropping.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I think from a consumer's perspective as well, I think as AI LLMs move from being a novelty to being a utility and something that's ingrained in your workflow, this bit of model dehydration is really important because I need fresh information to do the latest work, to know that my sources are real, that they're fresh. 2 years ago, maybe I didn't need or didn't think about. I didn't think to ask if my information was fresh.
right.
Whereas, so I think that might be something that the big content businesses out there, that they can hold that. It's not to ransom, but they can hold that as a precious
Especially
commodity,
news publishers.
Yeah.
The long tail SEO ones, like that's not a big deal for you. But
Yeah,
the news
sure.
publishers, that is. And that comes into competitive action as well. Like what's stopping Google today from moving into a licensing model? Very little.
Yeah.
I have a theory that they could use Google Search Console and AdSense to do the counting of queries and then pay publishers out directly. Those two mechanisms exist for them. They're what they are for. And I think making that code update isn't that hard for a company like Google. So they could do it. Now, let's assume that they actually do it. As soon as Google starts paying publishers for licensing content, Google publishers will use that blocking mechanism to block an OpenAI, and immediately model dehydration starts on OpenAI.
The snowball rolls.
How quickly do you think OpenAI will move into a licensing program if that happens to them at internet scale?
Yep.
Not just onesie twosies of a Reddit and New York Times and the little deals. And I think that's where competitive action then pulls it, right? And then you obviously have private action of everybody suing them and government regulation whenever the DOJ shows up. The UK has some interesting lawsuits going on. And unlike GDPR and privacy law, content rights are much more of a global problem for LLMs.
Sure.
Because you can't say like, oh, the European version of our LLM doesn't contain this content, but our US one does. That melting pot is like, we're well past soup and stew and we're down into like fine soup at this point.
So momentum creates momentum in that way.
Yeah.
And so to I guess to round out the carrot and the stick.
Well, we haven't gotten to the carrots yet.
We haven't got to the carrots. So talk to me about the carrots.
So licensing content through marketplaces has benefits.
Yeah.
One, there's solving a bunch of your legal problems, your public perception problems. And then also the data is structured for LLMs to consume it.
Right.
Imagine going to a website and how long it takes you to read it and find it in all the boxes and the places and the recipes are here and there, and some of it's hidden in JavaScript.
Yeah.
When you get it through the marketplace, it's all written in a markdown format that's very easy for the LLMs to ingest and consume. And then you're also moving from let's scrape the internet to find out what happened yesterday to let's query the sources where we know that there are updates being made, like newspapers, and use more of an API-driven system to get that information back in that structured format. And the cost is going to reduce significantly.
Got it. Okay.
And then you pay publishers and we continue to fund journalism.
There you go.
So there are some carrots that are out there, but I don't think that the carrots are enough to compel them, which is why I start with your stick strategy and remind them that carrots will be there when they show up.
Fantastic. I love that. I love the walkthrough, and I love the carrots and the sticks analogy. Thank you so much, Scott. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
You're very welcome. And credit to Danny at Ozone for the carrot edition. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Krish, pleasure.
Okay. So we're at RampUp in San Francisco 2026, and I'm very lucky to be speaking to Shaylee Singh, the Chief Operating Officer and EVP of Product for the IB Tech Lab. Is that correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, that sounds like an absolutely huge role, a very important one, and one that's probably keeping you up at night with a lot of different topics. So I'd love to hear your take on, where you've come from to get to that role, and what is actually your sort of number one thing that you're, looking at right now.
Yeah, so I've been here at IB Tech Lab for 10 years, since pretty much the founding stage. So This is my 11th year running at IB Tech Lab. Started working here as a director of product, looking after mobile stuff and ad products. And then of course, now I look at everything. And then I do pick up like every year, like one or two things that I really want to focus on. So it keeps me stimulated enough mentally and gives me some hands-on experience. So
I'm sure you're not short of things to to think about at the moment. So what did you pick? What was the thing that you have chosen as, I guess, your flagship or project for the next year?
So this year, there's a couple things like that I'm working on to kind of carry over from last year. One is the impact of AI on the industry as such,
Of course.
and what are different things in that. And the other is the project that I was just telling you about. Like we're trying to move the stack from the browser and free it from the browser restrictions to take it to the CDN as a server-side product, where you can manage all of your advertising. So those are the two main things. Within the AI, there are two areas that we've been looking at that I've been focusing on. One is the impact of AI on publisher revenues, the impact of AI search. That drops the, people have seen up to 30-40% reduction in traffic coming from search. And that means has an impact on everyone, like publisher loses revenue. It also has an impact on advertising industry, like the brands cannot find these new incremental users that they typically find on the open web. And then it drops down QPS for everybody else in the middle. So we have a project on that called Content Monetization Protocols. So we're trying to, because the value exchange moves up from the destination click to informing the LLMs. So we're trying to put together a set of standards and protocols where it's easy for LLMs and publishers to transact on the content and publishers to get paid or compensated for that value exchange that they've lost.
Right. So it's a framework to enable publishers to understand how to set up their stack.
It's
in order to best
it's got a 3-step. Like one is understanding your bot management, like which bot brings you value, which doesn't, and how to manage that. Second is to set up licensing, like how do you actually understand the license for each crawler that comes to your site. And then third is, of course, getting paid by how to, what the transaction looks like, how do you invoice them, how do you bill them.
Of course. And does that, out of interest, Google keep flip-flopping on their sort of cookie deprecation, and I guess that sort of plays into how you think about the standards you set behind publisher monetization as well. Is that one of the factors?
It used to be the case, but after all the back and forth, like I don't think we think about it anymore.
No, I mean, do you know what?
So we do think about signals in general because of privacy regulations that are restricting some of the signals that come through. Because of the privacy restrictions placed by platforms and browsers, like there's no third-party cookie in about 42% of the web in US, for example. In some regions, it's even higher. And then there's ad blocking. And then there is ITP restrictions that Safari has placed. And so we do think about that. So how do you enrich the signals? What are the other signals that can be passed that will enable a better quality decision on bidding?
Okay, so Shirley, I want to talk a little bit about publisher monetization and publisher futures. You've been busy with a project inside the IAB Tech Lab, regarding publisher CDNs and how signals are getting propagated from the CDN in order to better have the publisher take control. Can you talk us through what you're doing with the IAB there and why that's so important for publishers?
So what we're doing, the project's called Trusted Server. So the original vision of the project was to solve the problem that publishers face due to the restrictions of the browsers for privacy reasons. So no third-party cookies, and then ITP restrictions in Safari, which kind of stop and restrict the traditional methods of monetization, like that publishers use on the web. So they will kind of block the trackers, block the calls that are being made from the browser, and anybody who goes can look at that list. So that was the original idea, to move all of this work to the server side, where publishers can have full control, and they can give controls to their partners to do the things that they want to do. But then if you look at the other thing that we were talking about, the impact of AI and the traffic on the web today is more crawlers and more bots than humans. So in 2024, the first time, the web became 51% crawler traffic or non-human traffic. And a lot of that jump has been because of AI, because all these agents, companies like...
That's a terrifying stat.
So they need all the machines need all of this data to process and to train and to infer results for users. So basically the actions move to CDN. All of that happens to CDN. That's where you recognize what a user agent is, whether it's a human or not.
Got it.
If it's a human, you want to give them a nice looking HTML page and with all the JavaScripts and everything to run the page. But if it's a crawler, you want to just give it a markdown file, just give it the content. You don't want to, you can optimize all of the things there.
Right.
And we also found like, ad blockers. Like if you're on the server side, if you're already filling all the ads on the CDN and then sending to the browser, then you can bypass the ad blockers, which just means like 15 to 20% of the traffic.
Which is quite meaningful.
Which is kind of meaningful. Yeah.
Like that turns into revenue.
Yeah,
that's
straight
huge.
dollars, like
yeah,
and straight ROI on your investment and moving things to the CDN.
Yeah.
And CDNs like traditionally been looked at a place to distribute edge files on the edge,
Sure.
so they can faster delivery of files. But they're far more capable today. Like they've got the framework called WASM and WASI, which can actually execute server-like functions.
Okay.
So what that does is like in a browser, technically everything is a single thread. So if a JavaScript's written before, first it gets done, then the next one, then the next one.
Right.
And the server, it's all, you can do parallel path processing. So I can go out to Prebid, I can go out to Google Open Bidding, I can go out to Amazon Publisher Service at the same time, get all this, process everything back, package it, and push it back to the browser as a single page, which is also like
better for the page, better for latency.
Yeah, we haven't measured all of that yet. We're still testing all of that, but we've already seen like initial improvements and all of those things.
It sounds like not a no-brainer in that way, but it sounds like the closest thing to a no-brainer for a publisher whose traffic is declining, that they would take more control and monetize more securely of the customers that they do have.
Yeah.
If they've got less visitors, then it's really important to treat every one of those visitors like you know them and securely and be able to.
It's not happening today, but once LLMs agree to compensate publishers for their content, then that transaction will also take place and recorded at the CDN.
Yes,
that's when it will happen. So
yeah.
CDN is something that publishers and AdTech really needs to focus on and make the best use of. It's got the technology. It's got there's many business reasons to be there, and then technically it's proficient to execute what you need to do.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that I think more publishers need to hear and get leveled up on, because it sounds like a really robust solution for the long term as well for their health. Well, we've talked a little bit about bots, but I want to talk about one topic, which is agentic advertising or agentic ad tech, programmatic, whatever you want to call it. This must keep you up at night a little bit, because you've obviously spent so much time thinking about data and ad tech, but now you've got a world where potentially humans are not doing the thing, agents are doing the thing. And so when I say the thing, I mean, a media buy or placing a bid or an optimization or whatever. And so what is going on in your mind when it comes to AI agents and how you need to change how you adapt your frameworks? There must be things that maybe are still gray areas to you.
Not that gray anymore. We started working on it sometime last year.
Okay.
So we've been noodling with this, understanding MCP server, A2A protocols, and how that applies to advertising. We actually launched our full agentic roadmap. So we've taken, what we've done is it's got kind of 3 layers. So what is happening is you're going from automation to autonomous. So a few things are really going to be critical for those autonomous operations that happen. One, the first is people have to change their role from being operators on a dashboard and entering line items to architects and governance, giving governance guidance, giving the architecture guidance to the agents. And to do that, to execute on that, you would need to trust the agents, that they don't hallucinate. This is the right agent that my agent is talking to. That it's not some kind of spoofed agent come up from somewhere. And then you would need interoperability, that if somebody's got different types of agents, they have different systems at the back end of the agent, they can all talk to each other. So the work that we do, have been doing for 10 years, 11 years, is actually becoming even more important to have those standards in place. And when we looked at it, we realized that we have all the standards that you need to leverage. We may have to build some more new things to support the business processes. But for now, we think all the standards that we build, they're actually more meaningful, more critical, more important than ever before.
Absolutely.
In this world. So,
especially my mind is racing as you're talking about this, because the implications of not having standards in a world where agents are doing things doesn't sound great.
No.
it sounds like things can get out of control at a much faster pace than.
You can get hallucination. You can have agents like, so that's the thing with autonomous, like the amplification is much larger. So if it's going in the wrong direction for whatever reason, it amplifies that much faster as it amplifies the accuracy and efficiency as much better.
Absolutely.
So that's what we did. So we built like a 3-layer architecture, like we're calling it AMP, AMP with a double A. So agentic advertising management protocols.
Okay.
Which is a collection of 3 kind of major things. So at the bottom is like the foundational or the execution layer, which we're calling ARTF or agentic real-time framework, which allows you to take the outputs of the agents, the decisions agents have made, and plug them into the supply chain.
Okay.
So the plumbing and execution is not going to change. You still have RTB, you still be doing bidding, but how to make it work faster, make it work smarter. So the ARTF is that layer, which kind of plugs into the supply chain, lives in the host platform servers, so they can act really fast with very low latency. With the container technology, you get like 80% improvement in latency. So you have this luxury of time to make more quality decisions. The second layer is the management protocol, which is like the decision-making layer, which is where you do your media allocation, which is where the seller agent can start doing their optimization and being able to provide a better rate or understand the inventory better or exchange inventory better. So that is built on top of like our standards. We already have like that open direct that does direct sales. We have the deals objects, so we can be able to do deals through that. And we have the RTB. So if you have to set up a campaign on a DSP, you can just push it with the RTB objects.
Correct.
And all of that combines with the AdCom, which are the underlying objects and everything. So the agents can use that as the schema, standard schema, and then talk to each other and have much higher accuracy than otherwise they have. And a lot of the people like started questioning this like last year that LLMs understand English, so I don't need standards. I can just tell whatever and it knows. But if you go and read Anthropic's documentation on MC protocol, the first paragraph basically says you need a standard schema. You need to provide the LLM the right context. And nothing can provide the right context better than the standard schema that the industry has used for like 15 years. So that's a management layer. And then the third layer is the trust, where we just launched yesterday the agent registry.
Okay.
So people can come and register the agent. We do the verification of the agent. It can be an MCP server. It can be an A2A agent. It may need authorization. They can declare that, or they can provide a token for general discovery. But then we will hit their agent. We'll understand the capabilities. We'll list all of them. We also match it to the data that we already know about the industry, like the TCF ID or your GPP MSP ID. So then you have a verification, like this is a company that's already been certified to operate under GDPR. So I can actually work with this agent. Of course, there'll be commercial paper before you open up your system to anyone. But at least you can do a search. You can see like, okay, I already work with these companies. And so that's the trust layer. So we're creating all these 3 layers: the trust, the interoperability, and the execution.
Yeah,
together.
it sounds really robust. And I can imagine in a weird way, in an agentic world, once deployed, or these frameworks deployed, or once the initiatives are embedded, they'll get followed. And that's why they're more important in an AI world, because they'll get followed more systematically. More systematically, the agents will incorporate them, and they will actually make the agents and the LLMs even smarter. Yeah. Because now they will start learning how people operate on these standards, and then they get much more smarter. So they get much more accurate over time. Yeah. That's how we reach like that. I think we won't reach autonomous stage like right away. First, it will be like pilots, controlled pilots. Then it'll be like human in the loop kind of operation for some time. And then we'll reach like a fully, when you're comfortable, like people start, okay, I can let this part of my agent take framework run autonomously because it's never made a mistake in the last 1 year. Of course. Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, that's an incredibly exciting roadmap, and it's really cool to hear it from you specifically, because you've obviously come from a lot of tenured background in this space, but the path you're charting towards, I guess, autonomous is really exciting to hear. So thank you so much, Shaili, for talking with us, and we'll talk to you next time. Yep, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks so much.